Decision Making Part 2, Defensible Remedies. Hopefully, you are convinced that in today's world of big data, you are likely to make suboptimal decisions.
Decision making is part art, which is feelings, and part science, which is dealing with uncertainty. Typically, we start with an object. Then we find your candidates or likely solutions. And finally, we use whatever techniques we know to make the decision. Our advice is to consider criteria before you make any decision. Criteria are factors that influence the decision. Now that you have C and C, you need a process to make the decision. The quality of the decision will depend on several factors. However, the outcome depends on the implementation as well. So do not judge the quality of a decision by the outcome, because the outcome depends on the implementation as well. Well, because the decision maker has to negotiate with the problem solvers, the information providers, the implementers, the people impacted, and the manager with the budget, the authority, and the desire. That is why I say that every action is a decision and every interaction is a negotiation. For multi-criteria decisions, we have developed a 7-step approach. Clearly define your objective. Identify all relevant criteria. Conduct criteria segregation. Identify all available candidates. Gather information and create a judgment table. Assign weights to obligatory criteria. And finally, rank the candidates. As you can see, I have the letters AHP next to steps 3, 6, and 7. This stands for the analytic hierarchy process. The criteria are the drivers.
Imagine you're buying a home.
What criteria would you consider? There are plenty of them. What about criteria for buying a car? What about criteria for locating a branch office? Which university should you select? What about a small business? And of course, selecting a partner is far more complicated than we would like to admit. Too many criteria are counterproductive. We need to find a way to select the most relevant criteria and determine the significance of each criteria. For this, we use AHP. And finally, we rank the candidates again using AHP. As I said before, we need a process. We rely on the AHP technique. Those not familiar with AHP are likely to question its validity and its reliability. Some might even want to know if it has been used in industries. If you Google AHP, you will see that at the last conference, 90 papers were presented and 19 countries participated. There are many applications of AHP cited on the internet. So let me explain the AHP technique. All decisions are based on some form of comparison. We cannot look at this picture and say this person is tall or short. But when we compare him to another person, we see that he is short. Thus, all decisions are relative, not absolute. Imagine you're at an airport lounge and you're watching the TV screen and 2 pictures are presented. And you're asked to distribute 100 points among these ladies. 60-40, 30-70, whatever it is. Difficult? Probably not. Now you're shown 4 pictures and asked to distribute 100 points. Difficult? Probably a bit more. Now you're faced with 7 pictures. This time it requires much more attention and you're probably ready to give up. Let's get back to the pair. Would you say that the pair was the easiest to handle? Obviously. Would you agree that as the number of contestants increased, it became increasingly more difficult to make a reliable judgment? Let's take a look at a problem in the real world. Your manager wants to promote you but wants you to find a replacement. So you start with a set of criteria. Here we have 37 criteria and you're asked to select those that are applicable to your particular job. You might select 10, 15, whatever the number is. Now imagine 7 candidates are presented as well. Now in the previous example where I presented pictures of ladies, I only showed you the face. I did not show the body, the walk, the talk, the swimsuits, nothing. And even when you dealt with one single criteria, that of beauty, you had difficulty deciding between the 7 candidates. How do you think you would handle 10 or 15 criteria? It's almost impossible. Additionally, there are multiple decision makers. How would you make a defensible decision? This is a 3D problem.
multiple criteria, multiple candidates, and multiple decision makers, most certainly beyond common sense decision making. Imagine you're selecting compressors and you're faced with 13 criteria and 7 candidates and 4 departments. This would be a nightmare for common sense decision making.
Hopefully by now you are convinced that without a robust technique, you're likely to make some serious mistakes. The complete AHP solution involves serious mathematics, but you do not have to deal with the mathematics. Our free software is available for you to make these decisions. Considering only a pair of elements, we express the dominance of one over the other using a scale. In the case of buying a home, you might consider the price and the distance to work. So we want to know
Which one is?
more important on the dominance scale, whether it's equally important or if one is superior to the other to some degree. Imagine I offer you cake or fruit salad for dessert. I ask you 2 questions. Which one would you like more? And you say cake. Then I ask you, how much more do you like cake over the fruit salad? And you say moderately. Ladies and gentlemen, making even the most complex decisions can be simplified to these 2 simple questions. Which one? How much?
Multi-criteria decision making using the analytic hierarchy process. Most of the decisions we face in the real world are multi-criteria in nature. Typical examples could be procurement, recruiting, locating branch officers, etc. The best way to explain this is to consider a hotel chain hiring a business development manager. They identify 6 criteria and 4 candidates. Let us now look at the AHP software that we have developed. I have set up the recruiting problem, and when I hit continue, we have the criteria and the candidates that I have already inserted. We move on to the judgment table. The criteria judgment provides pairwise comparison. All you have to do is remember 2 simple questions. Which one? How much? So the first question is, between availability and leadership, which one is important to you? Availability. Then it's asking availability and salary. You might say salary. You proceed with this. When you finish, you simply say okay, and you hit continue, and you're offered the candidate judgment, which is identical to the previous case. On this occasion, you're offered 1 criterion with multiple candidates. Once again, we answered the 2 questions. Which one? How much? Which we say which candidate is more important than the other one, and to what degree. We do this for each criterion. When you finish, press OK, and we are presented the criteria weights and the candidate weights. Once we complete the evaluation, we generate a graph using the chart maker. We see that the optimum decision is Mary. Additionally, we have 6 bands. These are known as the N-1 evaluation. Here we have removed availability. Here we have removed leadership. And here we have removed salary, etc. And if salary is not an issue, so far better candidate. Could you have made better defensible decisions relying on common sense alone? Probably not. Cost-benefit analysis with sub-criteria. This is a very specific application of the HP technique. Consider typical decisions most of us face, such as bid evaluations, buying a home or a car, selecting a consultant, recruiting problems, deciding on how much insurance, site selection, such as retail outlets, scheduling priorities, etc. These types of decisions are all driven by associated criteria. The cost-benefit analysis is ideally suited for this type of problem. But to simplify the discussion, let's consider the purchase of a laptop. Here we have the criteria, here we have the candidates, and we have the sub-criteria information, which appear as data. The first thing we have to do is run the AHP evaluation to determine the criteria weights. Make sure you do not use price in the AHP evaluation. Now we have the criteria weights. Note it has to add up to 100. The next thing we do is we run the AHP evaluation on the sub-criteria, and we enter the corresponding weights in these pink cells. Once this is complete, we simply look at our cost-benefit data and plot a graph. This happens automatically within our software. As you can see, the Acer and the Dell are comparable in terms of benefits, yet the Acer is significantly cheaper. So it is up to the individual to decide whether to go for the Acer or for the Dell Inspiron. There are a whole host of applications for this type of evaluation, limited only by your imagination. we encourage you to consider using HP with sub-criteria when the consequences of a suboptimal decision is significant.
What we just saw was problems with multiple criteria. Now let's look at a problem with multiple uncertainties.
Single criterion decisions with multiple uncertainties using decision trees and D-zone maps. J&J Pharmaceuticals are developing a new drug for the treatment of diabetes, thrombosis, and cholesterol. However, J&J can invest only in one of these projects. The cost of pursuing these products, for the preliminary test, we would spend $2.5 million, and for the FDA approval, there would be a cost of $500,000. The marketing department has arrived at potential revenues from these projects. Here too, there are some uncertainties. There's a potential for high revenue or low revenue. For example, for cholesterol, the high revenue would be $13 million, while the low would be $7 million. Uncertainties facing J&J now. Will the preliminary test be successful? Will the FDA approve the new drugs? Will sales generate the projected revenues? The question for J&J is which product? We can start with a 50-50 assumption for all uncertainties and then study the impact of such assumptions on the final decision. Action plan. First draw the DT sketch, then develop the Excel model, then plot the D-zone map, and finally study the uncertainties. Here we have the sketch for the decision tree. We have three options, and let's focus on thrombosis. If the preliminary tests are successful, then we proceed for FDA approval. And if FDA approval is granted, we proceed to market, and there is a potential for high revenue or low revenue. Similarly for the other two projects. Now to step 2, where we build the Excel decision tree, and in this case, it is for the preliminary tests. Once we complete the decision tree model, with one click, we can create the D-zone map. The model creates 3 zones for the 3 decisions: thrombosis, cholesterol, and diabetes. The zone in which the red pointer lands is the recommended decision. Here we have 3 axes. One is for diabetes, the next is for cholesterol, and up here is the thrombosis. When I change the probability of success, the decision is thrombosis. If I change the probability of thrombosis success to 70%, again the recommendation is for thrombosis. What is important to notice is the distance of the pointer from these demarcation lines tells you the degree of freedom you have with regard to your assumptions. In this case, when the probability of diabetes success drops below 46%, the decision should be for thrombosis. Zone map such as this gives you tremendous flexibility to understand the sensitivity of your assumptions to the final decision. We repeat the same process for the FDA approval and the projected revenue, and we can see under all 3 scenarios, the recommended decision is to proceed with diabetes project. Could you have made better defensible decisions relying on common sense alone? Probably not.
Sure, anyone can make a decision and live with the consequences, but it would be very difficult to defend such a decision in a corporate setting. You must incorporate analytics to reinforce your decision.
Tools such as these allow you to study the sensitivity of your decision to the original assumption.
For learning and development management in an organization, the starting point is a needs assessment or a gap analysis. One track where this takes us is to determine the need for soft skill training. This brings us to work done by British psychologist Raymond Cattell, who studied performance and intelligence. He showed that at early stages of life, children learn language skills, social interaction, and general intelligence at a very rapid rate. But this peaks around the late teens, and fluid intelligence, which is associated with memory, problem solving, learning new processes, etc., decays quite rapidly. However, crystallized intelligence, which is practical experience, intuition, judgment, logic, etc., continues to increase. Our performance is a combination of these two. What training does is improve performance. Remember, every action is a decision and every interaction is a negotiation. Everyone needs to know how to make better decisions, and everyone has to negotiate at the workplace and beyond. The question is, why should we rely on a process? Imagine a golfer. Every evening he gets to a green and hits dozens of balls. He then picks them up and repeats the same process. He tries to perfect his technique and develop a process. Then, when he's at the tournament, he puts what he learned into practice. On this occasion, when he hits the ball, he relies on the process. Where the ball ends up, the outcome, will be known much later. The same is true when you make a decision. The outcome will be known later, sometimes several years later. You have to trust the process. Now imagine a sniper shooting at a faraway target. His hit rate might be just 30%. Now let us give him a scope, and guess what? His hit rate goes up to maybe 60%. Now in addition to the scope, let us give him a tripod. Guess what? His hit rate goes up to maybe 80%. These people did significantly better when they had a process and the tools. You too can make better defensible decisions when you use the appropriate tools and techniques. As Lee Iacocca famously said, the greatest obstacle to learning and discovery is not ignorance. It is the illusion of knowledge. And in his book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There, world-renowned coach Marshall Goldsmith has a message. As the information technology revolution changes the environment, those who do not update their knowledge and get trained will surely become obsolete. Metaphorically speaking, getting trained is like taking vitamins today to avoid having to take painkillers, basically damage control measures tomorrow.
Are you relying on untrained subordinates to provide you with options so you can make a decision? Beware. Though leadership is top-down, decision-making is bottom-up.
No other person in the world has a more comprehensive suite of products for decision-making. Open challenge. Check it out. We train with an emphasis on the 3 M's, the message, the messenger, and the message. We have in-house workshops and public workshops on decision-making and negotiation.
Do let us know if we can help you.